Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is day 38 of the Cappuccino Club Social TV. We've been going live every single day for the last 38 days, or most of them anyway. And so, a warm welcome from Cape Town, South Africa. Don't go away, we'll be back in just a moment.
Best is yet to come.
If you've just joined us, a warm welcome again to episode 38 of the Cappuccino Club Social TV channel. We've been going live for 38 days, or most of them anyway. And my amazing co-host is Viola Manuel. Viola, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. Thank you so much. How has your day been today? Day 38. We're about 3 days into level 4. And yeah, how's it going?
Day 4 has been a good day for me so far. I think for a lot of people, a lot of adjustments. Level 4 there's still a lot of, I don't know why, but there's a lot of confusion still about what is allowed and what isn't allowed under level 4. But I'm really looking forward to our conversation today because it's a topic that has been causing a great concern amongst a lot of people. Do you want to just lead into the topic briefly?
Of course. Thank you so much. We have the most amazing guests. I think just people who are being of great service to the community. They are going to be with us today. Lisa Woods, if any of you have been watching the shows, you would remember Lisa. Lisa serves on the board of an amazing NGO called Sisters Incorporated. And Deline, who manages this shelter, is going to be joining us. And they're really going to be talking to us about some of the challenges women are facing during lockdown. So I'm very excited to welcome them to this into the studio today.
Yes, absolutely. So let's first warmly welcome Lisa into the studio.
Hi, thanks so much.
Hi, Lisa.
Lisa, thanks for joining us. Now, you joined us in a different capacity before. Tell us a little bit about why you're joining us today, Lisa.
Yeah, so my normal daytime job is I'm an attorney for Guy and Associates, but then outside of normal business hours, I volunteer on the board of Sisters Incorporated, and it's an incredible NGO that exists in the southern suburbs of Cape Town. It's a shelter for survivors of gender-based violence, and they just do incredible work. It goes so beyond offering a place to stay. It's about upliftment, empowerment, and putting women back on their feet. And it's a very special organization. And I'm really excited that Deline can be with us today.
Yes, and let's not waste any more time. Let's invite Deline into the studio. And with that, Deline, a very warm welcome to you. You are the manager for Sisters Incorporated. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you love doing what you're doing.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My role at Sisters Incorporated is the manager, like you've said, and I've just celebrated 6 years with him the 2nd of May. I have been in the NPO sector for approximately 23 years. And I think I just have a passion of trying to help people and make a difference in their lives.
Okay, that's great.
So how did Sisters Inc. Come about? What was motivation for starting this organization, and who do you serve?
Well, Sisters Incorporated has started in 1959, and we've literally celebrated 60 years last year. And it started in an era where there was a shame for young single women being pregnant. and the parents needed to find a little place to hide, and then four doctors' wives came together, and that's the Swiss sister started way back. And today we actually open our doors to women and their children from abusive backgrounds, interpersonal relationships where there is abuse, rape survivors, and still the ladies that want to give up their babies for adoption.
Wow, that's a very broad group of people
I
that you're
just want, before we
serving.
can, just want to give a I just want to give a warm welcome to our audience on LinkedIn and on YouTube and on Twitch who've joined us, and of course our viewers on Facebook who will be joining us on the replay. I know that Celeste, who's a social worker with Sisters Incorporated, is trying to join us on audio. She's having some technical issues, but if she can join us on audio, we will bring her into the studio. So we'll just monitor and see if it is possible or not to do that. Viola, sorry, I cut into what your question to Delene earlier.
No problem at all. So I was just saying that is such a wide, sort of beneficiary base, if I could put it that way. You've got so many different people, and I think one of the things that you were saying to me that's really going to stick with me, that's been quite interesting, is that the shelter goes beyond sort of our traditional domestic. We talk specifically, when I think about survivors of abuse, you talk very often about sort of domestic violence between two partners, but you were saying that it actually goes beyond that. It's interpersonal abuse. So if you sit with a situation where you've got a child who's a drug addict and is abusing the mom, that's also somebody who can come and actually take shelter with you. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So if the person meets that criteria, definitely.
Okay. So one of the things that we were talking about is the impact the lockdown has really had on society. And one of the things we've recognized from the beginning of the show is that, very often the people we speak to are people that I would call more privileged than others. We do sit with privilege. We've got connectivity. We've got enough space to sort of socially distance in our homes. That's really a lot of who we get to speak to. But we were so excited to invite you onto the show to really just find out a little bit more about what's happening, with the rest of society. How are women coping? What have some of the unintended consequences of this lockdown been, Delene?
Okay, first of all, we are part of a greater movement which is called the Western Cape Women Shelter Movement. And because of this movement, they've identified 4 stage 1 shelters and Sisters Incorporated called in the stage 2 category. So what that means is that if we at Sisters get a query about somebody having to go into a shelter, they need to get out of their situation, they actually has to go to this stage 1 shelter. And there they are in isolation for 14 days, and then they come to us. So we've recently just had a mom and 3 children taking place with us after being in isolation at another shelter for 14 days.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you actually have to isolate the ladies and their kids, or whoever you're busy helping, before they can join the shelter.
That's correct. Yes. So we've had ladies in the shelter just prior to lockdown. We've had 3 that exited just on lockdown, and so we've got space. So this is communicated to other shelters and to the Department of Social Development. But then they reserve the beds with us. So we've already got the reservation for another 3 beds within the next week coming to us. So it's not like domestic violence is happening even in lockdown.
Yeah. So all the shelters who play a very similar role are working together, and I think that is amazing. When very often you sort of talk about the NGO sector being very fragmented. Everybody's like there's a rehab on every corner kind of thing. So it's very encouraging to hear that you all are working together and actually being able to speak to each other and plan and allocate resources based on what's going on. So that's interesting. Delene, a question from me, just a follow-up question. Has there been a spike in domestic violence over the lockdown period? Would you what are you hearing?
Well, the first 3 weeks, that the first couple of days that we've been in, it was actually very quiet. But once the president announced the lockdown was extended with a further 2 weeks, then we actually started getting emails, getting phone calls, and but obviously once again we need to redirect because we can't take the women indirectly into our own shelter.
Okay, okay. Lisa, from your side, just from the board's perspective, how have you guys, has the board been actively preparing for lockdown?
Well, in terms of the board, we are very much communicating by email, and Delene has been helping us set up to do board meetings via Zoom and use other platforms now, because ordinarily we would go to the shelter and we would have our meetings there every other month. So we're just finding electronic ways to assist, but I think, you know, in terms of commenting or giving an opinion, we were using email and other methods before, because all of us, apart from the people on the board who actually work at the shelter, like Delene, we all have our daytime jobs. So we're not actively at the premises all the time, and we specifically come in when needed. So I think for the board, it hasn't been a big adjustment, but for the shelter, I think it's been a big one.
Yeah, but just in terms of the strategic work you as a board are doing, you know, the collective, have you all been looking at, you know, sort of what kind of strategies have you put in place to actually allocate resources, support Delene and her team over this whole COVID-19 period?
Yeah, so to be honest, we probably should have had a meeting by now to discuss more actively. We've been doing it piece by piece. As issues come in, we've been dealing with them and mainly by email. And it's mainly, I mean, I've offered support where I can, like providing the permits that were needed for everyone to be able to work for an essential services company. And yeah, it's whatever people can do to assist. We've been, you know, volunteering what we are able, but for the most part, the shelter has protocols in place anyway for intake, and that would remain the same during lockdown. It's more just about whether you know, they have to change the structure of when women are able to immediately come onto the premises or not. But yeah, I think luckily we have to put so many strict protocols in place anyway on a normal day. So that can't change just because of lockdown. We're not actually being more strict. We already had to have the women, you know, have no contact with the outside world for a little bit when they first come into the premises. So I think, you know, so much of that was in place already.
Okay. Okay.
Delene, tell me, how do people actually reach out to you? Because, you know, if you are in a precarious situation at home with an abusive partner, whether that is you know, son, daughter, mother, father, whatever, or you know, a spouse, how do people reach out to you without being detected and without putting themselves in further danger? Because very often when you have an abusive spouse, they tend to want to control your electronic devices. So how are people able to reach out to you safely for assistance?
I think for us that has been a topic that we've been covering because it's very hard for you to actually try and make contact with the outside world without having the perpetrator like get hold of your device. So what the ladies has been doing is rather to send a email and make contact, because there is the gender-based violence number is out there, which is 0800 428 428, and there is the Skype me. But for me, to get hold of those numbers, you actually need to be away from the perpetrator to actually contact. So what we've been telling the women is that make sure that you have somebody on the outside that you can trust, and have a little bag ready with maybe your ID, your bank card, of those things, that if there is a moment that you can actually escape and make it to that person. I know that we are in lockdown and we know we are not allowed to move around, but that is the safest way to actually have a backup plan, by having a friend, a trusted friend or family member that you can go to. And also the fact that the police will be able to then assist. we've actually had cases where the police went in and actually physically removed the person for safety.
Okay.
That's good to know. That so from a practical perspective, do you find that the email contact is safer than them trying to make a call or send an SMS or a WhatsApp?
Yes, I think it is much, we prefer that the person would send the email because one of us would respond. And even though we are not the stage one shelter, we will make sure that the stage one shelters immediately get that email and for them to react because there is no contact number in there so the person can correspond. We will also say to see maybe perhaps to have a second secret phone, if we can call it that way,
Mm.
so that you can use that phone instead of the phone that the perpetrator is aware of.
I think the situation calls for a lot of awareness on our part. So if we have friends that we know may possibly be in a vulnerable situation, is to find ways of checking up on them without being very obvious. To have some sort of a code word, I would imagine, of contacting them so that you could know whether or not they are okay and whether they need assistance without being very obvious about it.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that, and I see that there's been things going around on social media. But once again, the thing is that you find that the perpetrators are also on social media. So there was this one thing going on around social media saying that we need to ask me how much is my sisters, and then I know that you're in trouble. I've seen that the 1,000 women are now using the color coded hearts to
Okay.
say to give different examples. If you send the yellow heart, then you are okay. If you send the different color heart, we will then identify what your need is because of the color
Yeah.
heart that you send.
But like you're saying, the perpetrators are also on social media, so very often
Mm.
they will be able to decode that. So
Mm.
and I also find that WhatsApp and SMS seems to be the one thing that the perpetrator would go to almost immediately when they get to your phone. Where they're trying to make a point. But I think email is one of the things that's possibly the last sort of gateway that they go to. The last point of communication is email. They'll check your caller logs. They'll probably check your WhatsApp. They'll probably check. So, it is quite enlightening to know that, you, I think the idea that you're talking about of having a trusted friend is a very
Mm.
important thing because a lot of women who sit in abusive relationships don't talk about it. They don't talk to anyone about it, and they sort of have this idea that they need to suffer in silence.
Mm.
And I think encouraging them to have that one person that they can talk to, that they can just tell them, give them an update, tell them when they're feeling fearful of their lives, somebody that you can talk to, that you could message, maybe have a code word like Brigitte was saying, with that specific person. That's not something
Mm.
that's on social media, but rather just you and that person know that that's your code word for I really need help now. I think that that's something that's quite interesting, because we also heard about the whole sister thing, and I kept thinking to
Yes.
myself, the husband, the perpetrator, the abusive son or the abusive daughter, or whoever the perpetrator is, might say, we don't have any money for food, but you buy sisters, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that becomes quite interesting. What I did want to find out from you is, do you think that this, how are you finding, what are women saying about when they're coming into the shelter? What are they actually saying? What are their comments about what's happening in the outside world, what's happening in societies around them and communities around them? Are they finding that with being isolated, that the abuse has escalated, or have you not heard anything around that?
At this point, the only person that we put in was a mother with 3 children, and they've been in the shelter for 2 weeks prior to us. So they haven't really spoken about what they've experienced. But what I know from our own residents that has been with us for the last 3 months or so, because some of them were on the verge of exiting the shelter when lockdown happened. And one of the residents actually went out for the SASSA money yesterday, and she came back and she told the residents that the staff has really watered down the situation out there, if I can use it that way, because we've been protecting them all along. They're not allowed to go to the shop. There hasn't been access for them to seek for cigarettes. They haven't had to go to the shop to actually know what is really happening out there. And the one resident came back here yesterday being totally emotional of having experienced what it's like to actually be part of having to social distance, having to have your hands sanitized. You can't go into the store if you don't have a mask. And that actually, we find that it's actually taken a few steps back now. So now
Yeah.
the ladies will experience something different because they've been protected for the past 5 weeks or so, not knowing what is really happening, because we make sure that we do everything for them. Go to the shop, we see that they have food and everything. But this one resident has really been traumatized of what she's experienced yesterday.
It's the world has changed. The world is fundamentally changed. It's been so it's you're walking into a different world now. Everybody's got masks on everywhere you go. So I can only imagine that it must be quite traumatic, because it's the trauma that we all went through with the support of everybody and the other things that were
Yeah,
comforting to us. You know, the environment that we lived in was comforting and so on. And we went through trauma to see how quickly the world was changing and the rules of engagement were changing. So, I mean, I really think about that. I have a question that I want to extend to both of you. But before I do that, let me just ask about the children. How are the children coping? What happens to kids who come into the shelter in terms of their education, in terms of their schoolwork? What happens to them? Just as a matter of interest.
okay, we have a qualified teacher on the premises, which is part of our normal team. And for the first few days, we just allowed the children to be with their mom so that they could understand what is going on with regards to COVID-19 and so on. But we
Mm.
are now assisting the moms with printing their homework, printing tasks that they get from the school so that they can adjust to keeping up to date with the work that needs to be done. At the moment, the team of sisters are at work 3 days a week. So we
Okay.
kind of a split team, and we don't have the childcare facility running full day. But we're gradually going into doing that so that the teacher can actually now just spend quality time with the school going children to get them onto a level where they need to be with or assist with homework that they need to do.
Okay. So my question really is about resilience. You know, we talk about women and how resilient they are. And I think women who find themselves in an abusive situation have the strength to leave it, because I think that's the first thing. It's just finding the strength to leave an abusive situation. They now have left that abusive relationship and then I found themselves with you trying to, you know, just take the first few steps of healing. It is about resilience. How do you describe that resilience? How does it manifest itself within these ladies? Lisa, maybe let me ask you that question.
Yeah, I mean, well, Delene will be in a better position to say what she's experienced on a day-to-day basis. But I think for me, what I've seen the most that's come out of sisters is you're resilient if you're ready to be. That's really the answer. Is that I think we struggle the most with the women who I think maybe initially take that step to come to the shelter, or someone brings them and it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to be there, and they will struggle a lot with the restrictions that are imposed for their own protection. But if they're ready to heal and be resilient, then honestly there's nothing that can stop them, because sisters just gives them that helping hand to get back on their feet.
Okay, Delene, how do you see that resilience manifesting itself?
Well, when the women comes there, they normally very much they keep to themselves. But by the end of the day, I think if Lisa recalls from our AG in last year, the woman said that if she didn't take the step to actually move away from her husband for that 3.5 months, she would have most probably been divorced. they were a couple that was married, what, I think 34 years or
That's a
something.
long time.
And yeah, and she actually just had enough of all the abuse, all the years. And coming to sisters allowed her to look at things from a different perspective, and also allowing her to just do everything to save a marriage. And on the other hand, he also then spoke at our AGM and said what a difference this separation has done for them. So it's really about what the woman actually wants to achieve herself.
Mm.
We can give you everything on a golden plate, but it's what you are going to do with the information and the sessions and the therapeutic stuff that you get from sisters. It's what you take away from it.
Okay. I know Brigitte
So
probably has a
recovery is possible.
yeah.
So
Yes,
it's- so
definitely.
so 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 having somebody go into a space of safety doesn't necessarily mean that that family unit is going to be falling apart. It can just be a time for healing in certain, obviously depending on the circumstances. It can just give people that safe space that they need for a while to regroup and then find ways of moving forward. So what you're saying is that you also offer family therapy in situations where that is possible.
That's correct, yes. So if the partner is open to actually have a session, because we've got a pastor on our board, and he would step up and speak to the male and give them homework per se. And if they prepared to do that little bit of homework, restoration is definitely possible. But then it needs to come from both partners. We will never tell the lady, go back to your husband, or go back to your partner. We will guide you, give you according to what your needs are, and you will need to make that decision on your own.
Okay.
I really like that you simply guide, but you don't influence them either way, so that the decision ultimately comes from the actual parties that are involved, and that you really just guide the process. We're kind of running out of time, and we
Yeah.
need to wrap up. Lisa, could you give us your final comments?
Yeah, I just think people need to be aware that I think things are not necessarily going well for a lot of families in lockdown. I think work would have been an escape for a lot of women in their home. They now are stuck there. I know a lot of people are frustrated with things like the limitation on buying alcohol, but there's actually a lot of good motivations behind that. And reducing gender-based violence is one of them, for not having access to alcohol in your home. So I think if everyone can be aware of what's happening with your neighbors, call the police if you do feel that you are hearing something, because a lot of these women are going to feel like they can't even leave now because of the lockdown restrictions.
Mm.
Celine, your final comments before we wrap up?
Yes, I want to say thank you for this opportunity, for allowing us to touch on gender-based violence and the help that is out there, even during lockdown. It's not, the person doesn't have to feel alone, and the person does need to know that it doesn't matter, even if they drop us a Facebook message, we will respond, because there is help out there. They're not alone.
Thank you so much from my
Celine, you've
side.
also sorry, before we end, Delina, you also have a book um, that was released by Sisters Inc. Just very briefly tell us about the book and where people can find it.
Actually, I have one.
Okay. Thanks, Lisa. Because Celeste was actually going to get us a copy of the
Oh,
book. Um, so the book is called
Thanks.
Survivors, and it was written by Dulcie Kirby. Totally a fictional story at the beginning, looking through the eyes of a fictional person. But the stories in there are real. Some of the ladies that wrote these stories gave us permission to publish it in the book, where they've been at and what they've been going through, and how they've been helped by sisters. So the book are for sale at the office. Anytime you can call us or send us a message. The big book is for sale at the office.
Okay. And would you guys then deliver, since your address is sort of kept under wraps? Would you deliver, or would people just meet you somewhere to get the book from you?
Well, I travel around with a box of books in my in my boot. So if
Okay.
anybody needs, and yes, we do have travel permits, so we'll be able for us to actually deliver books if people are interested.
Okay. From my side,
So I'm sure that's one way people can support you, right? By buying a book.
That's
that was
correct, yes.
that's my question. I really just wanted to know from you, how do people watching our show, how do they make a contribution, in a meaningful way? So buying the book is one. Is there any other way that we could be of assistance, our viewers could be of assistance?
We are open and we do receive donations, whether it's in kind or whether it's monetary. The only
Mm,
thing that we can't actually do at the moment is have volunteers on our premises, because that's normally a very great help. But that is a way of supporting us, is to either make a donation into our account. We do issue 18A receipts. So everything is perfectly normal for anyone that wants to make a monetary donation. We've got
okay.
all the necessary paperwork in order.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just, I think, from us at the CuppaChino Club, we salute what you guys are doing. We salute you for the work that you're doing, and not just necessarily for Sisters Incorporated, for everybody in the NGO sector that are playing such a fundamental role in just helping to keep society and communities and families together through such a difficult time. And I know that you guys make a lot of sacrifice, and sacrifice even some of your own family time to do the work that you do. And from us, just from this group of ladies that belong to the CuppaChino Club, we want to thank you so much for what you do, and just know that, we are behind you and we're thinking about you, and we really just want to send you virtual hugs and strength, and make sure that you know that, you are appreciated for what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I
Very
know
quickly,
that.
sorry, ladies, before we say goodbye to you, Yolanda wants to know on LinkedIn whether you have any digital copies of the book available for purchase.
Unfortunately, at this
No,
stage,
it's
no.
hard copy.
Only hard copies.
Well, that's
Yeah.
something to think about. That's a good way to pivot in this crisis. Try and get
It's
that book
true.
online. Probably get a lot more
Yes,
sales.
That's
we'll
true.
do
But I
that.
think we can arrange a delivery if someone is
Okay.
interested.
And how much is the book? That's the one thing we haven't asked.
Well, on Facebook currently it's still showing for 150 rand.
Okay.
Ladies, thanks so much. It was wonderful hearing more about Sisters Incorporated. We wish you well. And for anyone watching, please do go out and buy a book and support Sisters Incorporated. Thank you for being great guests today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks for having us.
That was great. Viola, what have we got in store for tomorrow?
So tomorrow's quite exciting. Tomorrow we've got Professor Turton, and I think Ben was joining us as well, two
Correct.
water specialists who are going to be chatting to us on a very different platform. We're going to be using a different platform tomorrow, but we're going to be having a fantastic conversation about the role water is playing in the whole COVID-19 crisis. And, we always think of water in terms of washing our hands, but there's another side to it that we need to be aware of as well. So I'm quite excited about that conversation too, because people forget our country still has a water crisis. We've just got a few other crises that have taken our focus off it, but there's still a very, very real water crisis in South Africa that everybody seems to have, is very happy to be forgetting about, but it's still there.
I think, if anything, the COVID-19 crisis has exacerbated the fact that we have a water crisis, because the two are inextricably linked.
Yes.
The campaign that as part of our safety, we need to be washing our hands. And it's highlighted the fact that there's been so many communities that were overlooked even during the water crisis for not
Agreed.
having access to clean water. And so somehow COVID-19 has given access to communities who didn't have water during the water crisis. So we could possibly touch on that bit as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so tomorrow is quite exciting. And then, of course, on Thursday, we've got Mitch joining us, Mitch Jackson joining us from the States. He's going to be talking to us about a very important aspect of doing business in this time. And during the COVID-19 period and during the lockdown period, he's going to be talking to us about liability waivers. So I'm quite excited to hear what he has to say. And what's more exciting is the fact that he lives in the US, so it would be nice to hear what their experience has been of lockdown and the unintended consequences that lockdown and the whole crisis has brought to their communities and their economy. So quite excited to have that conversation. And then on Friday, we've got amazing ladies within the energy sector again, speaking to us about how they've managed to pivot and make their businesses meaningful. And then on Saturday, we've got a really interesting guest who's going to be talking to us about her specific business. We, when both Brigitte and I when we read her bio and what she has been doing, we sort of said, no, you have to have a show on your own. So we're going to be speaking to her on Saturday to speak specifically about how she moved from doing one thing to the other and is now able to feed her family. So we're quite excited about all of that.
Absolutely. Look, great action-packed few shows coming up in the next few days. Thanks everyone for joining us live, and we'll see you back again tomorrow at 7 p.m. GMT +2. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.